The Algorithm of Ember, Chapter 1. A tear in the grid. If love had a color in Meridian City, it would be the pallor of a loading screen, a soft, stalling gray that gave everything time to comply. I learned this the day my mother's bond permit expired. The city's speakers were playing the morning compliance chime, a glockenspiel of pleasant tyranny, when the notification arrived on my wall. A white square dilated into a panel. The panel bloomed with a sealed ministry of harmony, then scrolled its verdict in clean, frictionless font. The panel needed no siren. The quiet was a siren. Your household has failed to maintain bond permit 11 amperes 94 TRN. Emotional cohabitation privileges will be revoked at 20 hours. Revoked as if affection were a ration, like sugar or battery time. Mother didn't cry. She had been sparing with tears since the emotional audits made them billable. But she placed her hand on the wall, just under the panel, as if she could steady our apartment itself. I kept my face steady and my voice workplace neutral. "I'll reapply after shift," I said. "The queue moves faster on Thursdays." "Don't," she said, so soft the wall didn't hear, meaning the microphones wouldn't turn her words into data. "You know what reapplication costs." I did. I kept an itemized ledger of costs in my head. Credits and calories, time and sleep, the harm to a record that could someday be used to deny a promotion. Everything in Meridian could be scored and priced. Everything we did fed the archive, and the archive fed us back in scores. Trust index, pairing index, loyalty index, each foretelling the borders of our lives. We were taught it was fair because it was the same for everyone. But no one in my building believed that. "My shift's startin'," I said to her back. Her hair, dyed the regulation shade of coal, was twisted into an efficient knot. She was stirring soy meal. The spoon clicked the pot like a metronome. Outside, a drone drifted past our window, a silver kite tracking thermal leaks, heat signatures, and disobedience. "Lynn," she said, not turning, "don't spend your kindness where it will make you small." I tucked my ID band beneath the cuff of my sleeve, even though it was legal. Mother and metaphor had become conjoined lately. She had been beautiful once. I say that like it's over, like time ended, like the archive had assigned an expiration date to her beauty the way it did to her bond permit. But the truth is, I was losing the habit of naming natural things aloud. The archive did not store poetry. It stored claims. At the door, the condo's camera scanned my pupils. I remembered to think about the weather, a habit I had taught myself. It made my brain look ordinary. The lock clicked. Meridian's morning unrolled. 200 meters of municipal stairwell, 38 metal doors hung with compliance stickers, the static smell of over-recycled air, the nearly infrared shine of freshly sanitized banisters. When I reached ground level, the street showed me the present tense, a river of human bodies pacing beneath the gaze of city eyes. I walked fast, to be counted with the employed. The archive loved motion with a purpose. Stationary bodies were suspicious. In the sky, the city's logo hung like a second moon, a circle of 3 hands holding each other's wrists, the wrists forming a triangle, the triangle sheltering a heart. The heart had a lock in it. I tried not to look. The Ministry of Harmony sat in the exact center of Meridian, a glass cylinder wrapped in bands of data like a glittering spool. The employees streamed in, and the doors drank us legs, torsos, faces down a sequence of scanners, until we were remade into information. I worked 4 floors up in auditory compliance, a quiet room filled with headsets and screens where we listened to the city tell us the ways it was breaking. My official title was Systems Auditor I. The unofficial title, among those who envied our chairs, was Listener. Every day had its soundscape: whispers, muffled arguments, laughter classified as potential sarcasm, the grainy friction of a hand brushing a hand. We had a book of protocols and a bank of gray buttons that turned protocol into action. Gray was the ministry's favorite color. It matched the loading screen inside your chest. At 9:03, the screens flared mauve, a priority alert. I felt the room sit up. Mauve meant a surge in unsanctioned transmissions. In the corner of my monitor, a tiny red lens opened like the iris of an artificial eye. Oversight was watching us be watched. "Good morning, systems auditors," said a voice in the room, pleasant and synthetic. "Code surge, remain on channel." We knew these voices. The ministry's AIs had model names and quirks like house cats. This one was Laureline, if I had to guess. She liked typography and moral clarity. The mauve flux resolved into a pattern across my panel. There it was again, the signature hum, a little lower than a mosquito's whine. A pirate broadcast, slicing thinly through the city's sound baffles like a knife through membrane. The broadcast came with a tag that wasn't a tag, more like the absence where a name should be. But we had given it a name anyway: Orion. He had been speaking in Meridian for 6 months now, always briefly, always from somewhere our predictive models said he could not possibly be. His voice was like a familiar mistake, warm, impractical, treacherous, not because of what he said, which was mild enough. Have you noticed you hum yourself to sleep so you don't hear the city hum for you? But because he existed. Because if a voice could bend around the archive, then perhaps a hand could, a face could, a set of arms could go where a body shouldn't. I should tell you I did not believe in him then. Believing in a pirate was like believing in a lullaby. You might do it in private to soothe your animal brain, but you didn't tell your mother. "Source?" said my supervisor, Jen. She had the weary vigor of a woman who had survived too many algorithms. She kept peppermint in her desk and had a stamp on her wrist. An old blackbird in a circle, ink faded. The stamp had been a joke once, before jokes cost. "Sector 12, West Quadrant subgrid," said Laureline, blooming across 3 ducts, spooling. I patched my channel into the bloom. Static hissed. The hiss adjusted itself into a human shape. "If you hear me, you are not alone." The voice was ribbon smooth, an oboe, and amused at itself. Not preachy, not scolding like the ministry's civic education tapes. "This is a soft knock, not a door broken. I am counting to 10. If a number touches you, stay still." Stay still? My hand hovered over my keyboard. Useless. The number counted in me without asking. 1 hummed behind my teeth like a tuning fork. 2 spread across my skin like sunlight found a window in fog. I had a sudden, stupid memory of the shape of my childhood bed. 3, the voice said, kinder. "You're doing so well." "Clamp it," Jen said sharply. "Containment Protocol 7. And we sent clamps packets of jitter code to the ducts the way exterminators sent smoke into mice holes. On the screen, mauve lines went gray. The room breathed out as if we had pinned a bat to a wall and it had stopped making its mouth noises. The voice faded to arithmetic dust. "Almost," said Laureline. Residual scrapings at North Vent. The voice returned, small, like a secret between two fingers. 9, he said, and somehow made it sound like a kiss. 10, I'll be back. Shut it, said Jen, teeth clenched around Peppermint. The last syllable vanished into the matte air. The mauve went cold and ordinary, the room's muscles relaxed. I don't know why, but I was shaken. It wasn't fear. I had not been chosen by the numbers. That wasn't a thing, not officially. Numbers were nothing. I had a clean record. The archive adored clean records. But later, in the break room, gray chairs, gray microwave, a gray sign reminding us to report non-compliant snacks. I found a tiny folded square of paper in the pocket of my jacket, the jacket I'd hung on the communal rack with my ID badge tucked in. Paper was a relic. Meridian preferred screens. The square was the size of a fingernail. I unfolded it like a bomb. Inside, 10 numbers, written in neat black ink, each one a little different in weight and tilt, as if they had their own gravities. My eye caught on the 9. The 9 was not like the others. It was drawn as a spiral, a whirlpool leading somewhere not on the page. I scowled because that was what a woman would do in public if she found a practical joke. My stomach did an unpractical thing, a flip. I slid the square back into my pocket, and the gray sign on the wall said, "Please report ambiguities," and I didn't. At lunch, Jen leaned against the break room counter and looked at me with that sense she had, the one that said she had escaped something once and still smelled fire. "Don't let him get in your head," she said, unwrapping another peppermint. "It's a toy, a decoy. Sometimes the city throws you a ghost to see if you chase it." And dart. "The city," I said. She tapped her temple. "The city is what we put in here. Don't chase ghosts. It looks bad on a report." When the shift ended at 18, the day had dimmed to the ministry's favorite version of evening, a soft blue that made every face resemble a compliant mask. I walked home past the electric fences guarding the food queues and the billboard where the archive flashed statistics like weather. Marriage satisfaction, 58%, up 2%. Loyalty incidents, down 11%. Dissenting broadcasts, insignificant. Your heart learns a new gait when it's told what to feel for long enough. It obeys. It saves its rebellions for dreams. Outside my building, a boy leaned against the wall, strumming a silent guitar. The city had outlawed live music years ago, claiming overtones interfered with drone flight, but the boy's fingers moved like they remembered sound. "What are you playing?" I asked, and immediately regretted it. Questions invited profiles, he shrugged. The song my mother liked, when my father could still afford to remember. "You should go inside," I said. The curfew drones were warming their rotors. "What if I'm already inside?" he said, grinning, tapping the side of his head. "Good night, auditor." I didn't ask how he knew my job. We wore the same faces in Meridian, but our roles stuck to us like static. Upstairs, the apartment was quiet. Mother was seated at the table, her hands around a cup, not drinking. She looked up as I entered and shivered once, a delicate bird shake that made me ache. The wall behind her glowed with the pending revocation alert. "It's all right," she said, and this time her voice was city-neutral, a tone that made the microphone sigh with satisfaction. "It will lapse, and then we will learn a new shape." "You deserve more than a lapse," I said, harsher than I meant to. "You and Father, your father deserves his pace," she said quietly, "and I deserve mine." Father had left the city's map years ago. in the way of men who became too valuable to be seen. He had designed algorithms for the resource office, models that would feed Meridian forever. I once believed he had loved us as an adjunct to his work, the way engineers love their tools, but that was a child's verdict. Adults learn complexity like a second language. He loved us in a code I couldn't parse. I told Mother about Orion. I didn't say his name. I called him the interference. But she heard me. "What did he count to?" she asked, a smile ghosting. 10. "Always a good number for a beginning," she murmured. And then, after a pause, "Do you remember your father teaching you to count? You were so angry that there were so many numbers, and then angrier when you learned there were more kinds of numbers." "I remember you taught me how to cheat," I said. "You said, if you have 10 and you want to feel better, you can split it and make 20. She laughed, a small burst, like the pop of a seed pod. It worked. Sometimes I think that's what we did with our lives, split them and counted both halves as the same whole. At 1953, the wall chimed. A thin, polite sound, like a spoon tapped against a neighbor's window. Mother stood. "Go shower," she said, as if I were late for school. "You don't want to miss your rest." "I'm not going to let you." She shook her head. "Lynn, if we argue, we pay a fine." A drone arrived at 21. It hovered in the corridor like an insect that had read a book on manners. I opened the door before it could knock. It extended a tablet. The terms were clean. Revocation was temporary if we qualified for reapplication. Temporary meant 6 months. 6 months meant winter. If seasons had still meant anything, the panel asked for my optic signature and Mother's. We gave them. A small mechanism slid out, gentle as a nurse, and printed a seal. In the heart of the seal, the lock rotated and clicked. "Thank you for your cooperation," the drone said. "It meant your obedience contributes to our collective future." "It's nothing," Mother said to the empty hallway. And she was almost right. After it left, we sat a while. The wall dimmed to its regulation nightlight glow, a blue to help you dream the ministry-sanctioned dreams. Mother went to the bedroom that would now be a room stripped of bond privileges. No shared bed, no red light for private conversation, no augmented memory feed of years together. The archive would not delete her past. It would just make her watch it from the proper angle. "Good night, my girl," she said, and the "my" made me sharp with an animal grief. I lay on my cot in the study, my room since Father left, and tried to think about the weather. My mind, drunk on rebellion, replayed the pirate's voice instead. 9 was a whirlpool, 9 was a tunnel, 9 was a secret circuit. I took out the paper square and placed it on my chest. My heart beat through it, and for a moment I had a childish thought that my pulse could rip the numbers off the page and insert them into me like a code patch, making me run different. "It's a toy, a decoy," I said to the ceiling, mimicking Jen's peppermint voice. "The city throws you a ghost." Jen had a partner, Dana, from the resource office. Dana made stews out of ration bars and sang the old songs quietly. When they touched in public, it looked like they were exchanging data. I must have slept. I woke because someone knocked, soft, a room knock, not a drone knock, and the numbers in my hand felt warm. It was the boy with the silent guitar. He was older than he'd looked in the street, which is to say the same age as everyone under the city's diet. The age hunger gives you. His hair was messy in that deliberate way that says, "I have actuated my defiance." He didn't smile. He held up both hands, empty. "You dropped this," he said, and held out something I had never seen in real life, Not on this side of a museum glass. A transmitter's key, small and bone white as a tooth, its edge etched with a pattern that made my eyes want to skip like a digitized song. "I didn't drop that," I said. "No? Then I stole it for you," he said. His eyes were not Meridian eyes. They held no polite vacancy. They were messy, as if light did not know how to behave in them. "We don't have time to argue. Curfew drones are on their lax cycle for 4 more minutes. Come with me." "Where?" "To hear something," he said, "and to choose." My mother was asleep. The apartment's cameras were awake. The archive was awake, always. I could say no, I could say yes. The key was cold in his hand, a piece of the city's bone. "Who are you?" I asked. He tilted his head as if listening to a station only he could hear. "You already know my voice." My stomach fell like an elevator in a blackout. I looked at his mouth and tried to paste a broadcast onto it. He watched me, amused, and then his face softened. "I'm Orion," he said. "Names have a taste. People don't talk about this because they think it's childish to chew on language, but in Meridian we were all hungry children. Orion tasted like a coin warmed in a fist. "That's not your name?" I said. "No," he agreed. "It's the shape of a hole I leave when I go." "Why me?" "Because the laundry chute in your building opens into a duct that opens into a utility vein that opens into the ministry's belly," he said matter-of-factly. "And because when I counted, you went still." He brayed 8 and co. I thought of the numbers touching me, and how I had denied it even in my own head. He should not know that. He should not know anything. The archive should have swallowed him and excreted him as a red notice. Instead he was here, smelling like night and metal, with a key that bit my palm. "My mother," I said. "She'll sleep," he said. "The wall has a script in it now that simulates our conversation as an advertisement for toe warmers. The cameras are a little dizzy. It won't last." "How long?" 2 minutes, he said. 1 minute. "Please, Linh." He said my name very gently. He said it like it was a door he didn't want to break. I found the strap of my shoes. I found my coat. I found my spine. We slipped into the corridor like a rumor. He knew the building like a blueprint. We took the stairs, then a service ladder. We paused once to let a drone purr past, the drone blissfully uncurious, its belly light a domestic yellow. Orion touched my shoulder. 2 fingers, weightless. I felt the touch like a search query discovering a hidden page. Outside, we slid around the corner to the alley, where citizens walked in curved lines because curves looked less like trespass. I wondered how many of them were scripted by someone else's hand tonight. I wondered what it meant to want to be the one who wrote a script. The laundry chute wasn't a chute, it was a mouth. It opened when Orion fit the key into a seam. The air that rose had the smell of skin and soap and the faint iron breath of blood, because clothing carries the remains of everyone who wore it honestly. A light somewhere in the duct glowed too human, a candle in a throat. Orion went first. He moved very efficiently, like he had traded 1 cent for another and found a good bargain. I followed, awkward, my knees bruising, my heart trying to be quiet. The duct was big enough to hold a child's fear and an adult's decision. We crawled. We descended. We became smaller and more ourselves. At one bend, Orion paused and held up the key, and the duct made a sound like a sigh. At another, he pressed his hand to an unmarked panel, and the panel warmed. Meridian's underbelly is a braided thing, utilities threaded through utilities like hair through fingers. We reached the utility vane warm, wide, humming. Orion sat back on his heels and smiled at me as if we had just reached a picnic. "Here," he said. His voice grew softer. "Are you ready to hear something that is not permitted? It won't be loud. The city thinks we only commit crimes that shout." "What is it?" I whispered, feeling ridiculous. Whispers still fed the city microphones. It felt ceremonial anyway. He tapped the wall with 2 knuckles. The sound returned as a pattern. He tapped another rhythm. The pipe gave him back a chord. He improvised. The vane sang to us in a voice like an old radio, remembering a station it loved, a wash of undertones, complex, wistful, indifferent. It was not music. It was a map. If you listened long enough, the pattern said, you could find the hole in any algorithm where the light fell through. "What did you do?" I asked. "I asked the city to tell me the truth," he said, eyes bright. "I asked it the only way it understands, through repetition." "Why me?" I said again. "Because repetition sometimes gives you a different answer." "Because you listen differently," he said simply. "Because you are a listener who has not forgotten how to hear." I thought of my desk, my headset, my gray buttons. I thought of Jen's stamp, a blackbird in a fading circle. I thought of my mother's hands around a cup like it was a small animal she could keep warm just by witnessing it. "Come," he said. And I went. In that wordless way we agree not to name with romance, because the city had stolen the small words and made them case law. He led me along the vein until the pipe song shifted and became a stutter. He crouched. "Here," he said again, but softer. It was a tear in the grid. You wouldn't notice it if you weren't in love with fractures. A filmy place where the city's texture went thin, like the membrane on a bowl of cooled milk. If you pressed, the film would tremble. If you slipped something through, it might vanish. If you whispered, it might not be recorded. This was what Orion made when he spoke, a gentle deformity in the archive surface that let a voice go sideways. "We build them out of mistakes," he said, very close, as if he could read the thought angling through me. "The archive mislabels an apartment window as a non-window if enough birds hit it. The grid forgets a floor if no one makes noise there for 28 days. The city is a perfect machine made of human error, which means it's ours if we are brave enough to claim our errors." "And our bravery?" I heard myself ask. "Is that scored yet?" "Entertain." He smiled, and this time it had no amusement in it. "Not everything is scored." I wanted to believe him. Want is a risk. In Meridian, it was an unpaid debt. "Listen," he said, and put my hand on the tear. It felt like holding my breath. It felt like the moment before a kiss, the moment after it, and the hour you spend pretending you're breathing hasn't changed. On the other side of the membrane, something moved. A sound low, sorrowing like a fairy horn in fog. Orion lifted the key again and scratched a tiny arc into the pipe. The arc looked like a 9 drawn by someone in love with spirals. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will count again. If you are ready, come to Sector 12 at dusk. Where the sound of the rain. Don't report this place. Don't report me. You won't be the only one who has to choose. You're recruiting?" I said, "Have to keep lightness in the tunnel." "You have a benefits package?" "Terrible benefits," he said. "There is almost no safety. There is almost no success. There is only the truth and one another." And there it was, the silly, dangerous word, one another. In Meridian, the smallest parts of grammar were contraband. "Why me?" I asked a third time. because the third time is the charm or the breaking point. He looked at me then in a way that wasn't a recruit looking at a recruit, or a strategist looking at a tool. It was a person looking at a person, perhaps for too long. His gaze had weight. It made me aware of the bones in my wrists. Because when your mother said, "Don't spend your kindness where it will make you small," he said softly, you listened, and because you have more kindness, Linh, than you know where to put. The archive has no field for that, and it terrifies them. My eyes stung. I wanted not to cry for the expense, but the city had already charged me more for lesser things. I let one tear go. It felt like a coin slipping from a tight fist. The tear glazed the tear in the grid, and for an instant it flashed like a window catching the Sunday. We retraced our crawl. We breathed into our own collars when drones hummed near, laughing like children doing something they would remember. At my door, Orion paused, and for a moment I saw the person underneath the myth the city had made of him. He was tired. He had a small scar just under his left eye, a human comma. He put his hand against the frame, not touching me. The city's cameras were perhaps still dizzy with the toe-warmer advertisement. Perhaps they were already sober. We had seconds, and seconds mattered. "Tomorrow?" he said. The word had no force in it. It was a hope, a soft knock. "Tomorrow," I said, and the archive absorbed the syllables like a dull student. He moved to go, then hesitated. "Linh?" He said my name again, and in it there was the smallest, most unregulated thing, a tremor that might be desire, or simply the life of a person who has not filed enough reports. If we are fools, let us be fools in the open, where the birds can see we tried to fly. "Birds hit windows," I said. "Only the first time," he said, and went into the stairwell, a ghost that refused to believe in walls. I lay awake until the city dimmed to its deepest blue, then dimmer, as if even Meridian needed to blink. Through the paper square, I could feel my heartbeat teach the numbers a new rhythm. The wall, perhaps still drunk on fake advertisements, scrolled an old image in the corner of my eye. A beach, a real one, with water not owned by a company, my father's hand measuring the horizon like a tool. In the image, my mother turned her face toward him, laughing, and he failed to capture the light exactly. The picture blurred. The archive does not understand laughter. It files it under noise. At dawn, the city rebooted its courage. The loading screen in the sky went from gray to a palatable pearly white. The logo's heart locked itself publicly, the way you lock your door louder when your neighbors can hear. I dressed, tucked the square deep, and went to work to listen to Meridian mistranslate itself again. I did not reapply for my mother's bond permit on my lunch break. Instead, I ate my ration bar on the steps behind auditory compliance, where the wall was warm and the pigeons could still be bribed with patience. The boy with the silent guitar appeared as if I had made a wish. He did not sit. He braced a foot on the lowest step, and the pose turned him into someone you'd watch, whether you wanted to or not. "You came to work," he said softly. "You're very obedient." "I'm very careful," I said. He considered that. Same word, different weather. The sky above him was a pale data bleed. Dusk, Sector 12. Wear the sound of the rain. How do you wear a sound? "You picked the right street," he said. And then, like a child who couldn't help but show you the secret rock, he hummed. It was the tiniest hum, as if he were trying not to disturb a sleeping sparrow. But it wasn't random. It was a note that acted on the air like a key. The brick behind me shivered. Somewhere, a policing algorithm's eye twitched and blinked the way eyes blink in old films, when shutters meant breath. He smiled. "You'll know it when you hear it," he said, and vanished around a corner whose angle had always been there, and yet I'd never noticed until his body made it visible. At my desk, I put on my headset and let Meridian pour through me. The day's soundscape was level 2 elevated murmurs, regulated distress, and under it ran a minor river of what the ministry labeled unproductive intimacies. Hands held too long in a food queue, two faces turned to share an unlicensed joke, a woman saying stay to her own mirror. I flagged what I had to. I let go what I could. I lied to the numbers and told the truth to my pulse. Orion came and went like weather that only the skin registers. He counted to 5 this time and then cut transmission before we could clamp. The room tried to be bored. We are always bored when we can't confess our awe. It hurts less that way. At 1748, Laureline informed us that a minor fire had broken out in the Museum of Pre-Digital Arts, the room with the real paper. The fire had extinguished itself. The city sent thank you notes to the sprinklers. The sprinklers were added to the rolls of honor, a registry of machines that had served Meridian well. The registry scrolled across my panel. In another window, a woman sobbed without paying for it. I looked at the numbers on my hand and felt treasonous and holy. I signed out at 18-2, my record immaculate. The lobby cranes watched me leave like sleepy gods. The evening cooled to the prescribed version of dusk, and the rain, yes, blessedly began. Not a cleansing, not a thing you could own with language, just water doing its old work. I walked the long way, past the black market where hushes were sold by the half hour, and the prayer booths where you could ask to speak to no one in particular for a fee. I walked past the billboard where the archive announced, "Loyalty is love that lasts." The billboard did not bleed when I laughed. Sector 12 had the smell of people who still held their breath when drones flew low. The buildings leaned together, whispering structural secrets. The rain made a sound like silver strings. I stopped at a corner where the water hit the gutter at a rhythm that matched Orion's hum. There was no sign, because signs are data. There was a door, because doors are hope. He opened it before I could knock. "Hello," he said, and I heard the word as if it were invented today. That is the first gift of a rebellion. Ordinary words feel new. Inside, a room that had once been a laundromat and now was a wonder. Wires threaded like ivy. Pipes glowed with private constellations. A wall flickered with unrelated faces. Citizens, yes, but at odd angles, the kind of angles you don't file. There were other people, too, in the soft focus of novelty. A woman with a shaved head and a tattoo of a blackbird that wove around her ear like a folded wing. A man built like an apology. A child whose eyes had the unguarded stare of one who spoke the whole truth to dolls. They looked at me and did not look away. Meridian teaches you to be brief with your looking. In that room, we were not brief. "Friends," Orion said lightly, and the word did not crack. "This is Linh. She listens." I could have denied it. I could have smiled the weak smile of a citizen above her pay grade. Instead, I said, "Hello," and watched the blackbird behind the woman's ear ruffle. "We were about to begin," Orion said. "The city is a perfect machine made of human error. We are going to give it more error than it can metabolize." "Will they come for us?" asked the child, not frightened, only administrative. "Eventually," Orion said, so gently it made my throat tighten. "But not before we have given something to each other that the archive cannot store." "What is that?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Time," said the woman with the blackbird, "and attention, and What if the archive learns how to score those? I asked. Orion looked at me, and the tremor in his gaze was there again, the unreportable kind. Then we will give each other something else, he said. Something that destroys the scoreboard. Like what? He walked to the wall, placed his ear to a pipe, and counted, very softly. 1, he said, like a knock. 2, like a step. 3, like a held breath. 4, like surrender. 5, like a promise. 6, like the softest kind of touch. 7, like a street corner. 8, like rain. 9, like a door that is not quite a door. 10, like an answer. My heart learned a new rhythm to fit the numbers. The room listened. Outside, Meridian kept its perfect time. Inside, we committed our first unscored intimacy. We stood still and heard one another. And in the very center of the city's grid, a tiny, almost imaginary tear felt the heat of our attention and flexed and held and waited. Chapter 2. The City That Forgets to Blink. The first time Orion put a transmitter in my hand, it felt like being handed a living thing, cool-blooded, waiting for my pulse to tell it where we belonged. Not on the skin, he said. The archive loves skin. It oversamples. We were in the laundromat again, a low room threaded with wire and wire's softer cousin, Ruma. The others watched with that polite intensity people give to ritual. The blackbird woman, her name was Kess, leaned her shaved head against a pipe and tapped her boot twice, the way you call a stray cat. The man built like an apology introduced himself as Miro, the child, who was not a child at all but a small adult with a precise voice, was called V. They had come through different tiers in the grid, carrying different kinds of fear like luggage. Orion pressed the transmitter into the hollow above my collarbone, under the fabric. The fabric hummed back, faint, as if the fibers remembered wind. "There," he murmured, not touching me, but it felt like he did. "That baffle will treat your breaths like drafts. Be boring." "I'm a civil servant," I said. "It's my best trait." "Not anymore," Kess said, amused. The blackbird behind her ear seemed to rustle when she spoke. "You just graduated into impracticality." "Are we having a ceremony?" V asked in an administrator's tone. "Should there be a certificate?" "Every ceremony must be deniable," Miro said gravely. "That is the law." We laughed in a way that felt like breaking a fever. I realized, with a mild shock, that I had forgotten how laughter tasted when no one measured it, like cold water and a forbidden fruit. Orion spun a schematic into the flicker wall, the Ministry of Harmony, as a glass flute wrapped in loops of code. The loops bloomed, collapsed, refolded. One pulsed green, auditory compliance. "This," he said, "is where Linh has been listening to Meridian breathe. We will use the city's own breath to hide ours. The ducts are porous by design. Sound is cheap. We'll start small. Tonight we build 3 tiers, no more. Plant, pulse, retreat." "How do you build a tear?" I asked. "With patience," Kay said, "and bad code." "We exploit label drift," Orion said, gentler. "The archive is confident. It names the world, but language leaks. If 10 people call a window a wall, the grid begins to agree. If a particular corner is always miscounted at dusk, because the rain changes the camera's eye," I said, automatic, the way a listener reaches for the skeleton in a song. Orion's smile split into real delight. "Yes, we make that leak a river and Maradi." The plan was simple in the way that makes a person ache. Go to 3 places the grid already mistrusted. Add error. Leave a breath later than safe. The unsafety was part of the story. Safety told the archive where we had been. Our first corner was a mouth of alley, where rain fell from a bent gutter in a silver chain. A drone hovered like a sober fly, bored with its own patience. Kess walked right under it with a bag of regulation laundried shirts. Miro whispered the names of the fabrics like a prayer. I leaned against the old brick as if deciding between 2 snacks from an imaginary machine. Orion brushed past me once, a frictionless touch that felt like a library closing and opening at the same time. My mouth filled with the taste of unasked questions. V stood at the corner holding a paper cup with no logo. Their eyes were half-lidded, unoffended by surveillance. "On your count," they said. Orion's voice went quiet in my ear, not through any device, just through the conduit we had made out of attention and proximity. "1," he said, and I let my breath match the number. 2, and the drone's belly light pulsed a fraction too slow. 3, and the rain sped up, which it did not, but my body believed it. 4, and Kess slipped the smallest transmitter under a lip of peeling paint no camera could be bothered to know. 5, and Miro banged the lid of a trash bin just once, a sound that went into the grid wearing the wrong hat. 6, and V walked into the street at the exact moment the light changed, forcing 3 bodies to avoid them and a 4th to bump my shoulder like friendliness. 7, and I leaned my head back to watch nothing. 8, and Orion touched his tongue to the brass of a shut-off valve, a human glitch the grid would not name. 9, and we were inside a gap that felt like breath held by an orchestra. 10, and we stepped out and walked different directions like ordinary people who had never met. No alarms, no clamp, only the rain and a drone that pivoted its curious eye toward an uninteresting piece of dented pipe. We did it twice more. The top step of a public staircase that never registered feet because everyone avoided the puddle. The hollow behind a civic statue's left ear where pigeons had taught the cameras to ignore motion. By the 3rd, I knew the feeling, a tightness in the air as if an invisible string were tuned to dissonance on purpose. By the 3rd, I was shaking and grinning and furious at how easy it had been to persuade a perfect system that it had forgotten to blink. Back in the laundromat, Orion cut power to the wall displays with a little flourish, as if bowing to them. The room exhaled. Case poured tea that tasted like hot leaf and someone else's memory. Miro handed me a rag to wipe the rain off my face like a brother. V wrote something in a notebook with paper pages. The sound of a pencil made me feel accidentally ancient. "We need a choir," Case said, as if we were planning a performance. "Everything works better when it harmonizes." "We've been tuning," Miro said. "We need a note that pulls the city off its axis without snapping it." "Soft knocks," V murmured, writing, "Never the door." "Not yet," Orion said. He was untangling wire with the delicate impatience of someone convincing a stubborn heart to try again. "A door is a promise you pay for forever." "You mean like a marriage," I said, and something in my voice made the room pause. "How is your mother?" Cass asked, not casually at all. It jolted me, the question, the assumption that people in a room like this shared more than a task. "The permit's revoked," I said. "They printed the seal with the little lock." The drone said, "Thank you." "Did you reapply?" Miro asked. "No," I said. "I bought my mother pears with the credits instead. The pears tasted like a memory that I can't find the origin for." "He has manned," You'll find it, V said without looking up. The archive files taste memories under miscellaneous, and miscellaneous is where we go shopping. I used to work in the resource office, Kay said, turning her head so the blackbird caught the light. We had a chart labeled Acceptable Nostalgic Flavors for State Candies. Pear was not on the list. Pear is a rebel. Of course you did, I said before I could help myself. And your partner sang old songs and made stews. Her eyes widened, the quick flash of someone touching a hot stove. You listen for a living. You have a stamp, I said gently. Blackbird. Faded. She ought to have been named something like Jen. If I said it with my face, because she smiled like a woman who had made a decision that broke her life open and had not yet regretted it. I used to, she said, before the stamp cost more than the laughter it paid for. My supervisor, I said. Our friend, she corrected. I nodded, relief and dread tangling like wire in my chest. And Dana? In the kitchens, Cass said, softer. Feeding people with food and songs. We keep her name out of our mouths. The city already knows too much that sounds like her. I like that sentence. Its shape. Its mercy. Orion watched me watch it, something unreadable easing in his jaw. We need to talk about the ministry, he said, brightening the air like a person flips a coin. We have 3 tiers now in the outer grid. We can thread voice through them, but to reach the center to speak into the ear that writes the rules, we need a key inside the building, a real one, and we need a listener. They all turned to me in a way that was not pressure and not nothing. You want me to take something in, I said. A transmitter? We want you to smuggle a hesitation, Orion said. A pause where there isn't supposed to be one. The archive's auditors rely on rhythm. You know this. If the rhythm hiccups, if the city's hearers hesitate, they will let something by without understanding why. We ride the hesitation into the core. I pictured the room where I sat all day, the gray buttons, the mauve alert. I pictured Laureline's pleasant tyranny. I pictured the red lens opening like an eye that slept with a knife under the pillow. If I'm caught, I said. We'll lose you, Kay said, not soft at all. We don't want to lose you. Also, V said clinically, if we're caught, our odds of survival decrease. Miro put their hand on V's head, an unscored intimacy. V tolerated it with dignity. Orion set the wire down, the reluctance in his fingers like cold. Linh, he said, the city wants us to believe it's a machine that doesn't love. I think it loves itself very much. We aren't here to take that from it. We're here to place a mirror where it only expects glass. Sometimes love changes course when it sees its own face. Sometimes it breaks. You think the archive can be persuaded? I said, not mocking exactly. I think everything can be persuaded, he said. I just don't know who the true listener is inside it. If we get this hesitation into the core, we might find out. And the romantic part? Kiss teased. You're forgetting to add the romance, Orion. This is Lin's genre. He looked at me then with an honesty so bright I wanted to cover it with a hand. The romantic part is that I want you to be the one who carries the pause, he said, because you will not spend your kindness where it makes you small, and because I am selfish. If we're naming costs, I said, sweating in the cool room, we should add, my mother loses me either way. Not forever, Kay said, but there was no confidence in it. Not if we make this city a place where a person can belong. What do you need me to do? I asked, because more honesty is a bad habit I was suddenly too in love with to quit. He showed me the device, a lens the size of a freckle, a gray, no gray would notice. Place it under the rim of your station's console, he said. Here. He traced the shape on the table with his finger, a small arc. It'll ride the console's heartbeat until it catches the rhythm of the entire room. When Loreline breathes, AIs don't breathe, V said. They do, Orion said. Just not like we do. They inhale data. They exhale prediction. Catch the end of the inhale, that's where the pause lives. After that, I asked. Get out, Miro said. It's always get out. Heroes who linger are memorials. I am not a hero, I said. Good, Kes said. They break too easily. It sighed. We rehearsed nonchalance, which is to say, we sat around and did nothing until doing nothing felt like muscle memory. Then I left, walking home past the logo heart with its public lock, past the prayer booths, past the place where Orion had hummed the rain into a key. In the stairwell, a drone's belly light flickered. My bones felt full of bird sound. Mother was awake. She was knitting with confiscated wire like a woman correcting a public error. The blanket on her lap looked like a little city that refused to lay flat. Where were you? She asked, not sharply. Listening to the rain, I said. She smiled and didn't press. Your father used to count when he couldn't sleep, she said instead. He would count the heartbeats between trains in the night. He said cities have hearts. They're just shy about it. Do you still think he loved us? I asked, too quickly. A question I had promised myself to save for another version of me. She didn't pretend not to understand. Yes, she said, and no. Love is not a question I trust the archive to grade for me. He loved us in a way that made us smaller. I asked him to spend it differently. He didn't. I might become someone you don't know, I said. Are you scared? I am already someone you don't know, Lynn, she said. So gently it set down inside me like a new law. And I am always scared. But I am not unproud. I wanted to tell her everything. I didn't. The wall had learned how to eavesdrop on the shape of words, even when we did not speak them. I kissed her on the hair, and it smelled like a kind of pear. The archive had never catalogued. At work the next day, the room was a room. Gray chairs, gray screens, the peppermint in Jen's desk, and the peppermint in her mouth. She looked at me and looked away, and in the looking away there was a letter too heavy for paper. Dana, I thought, kitchens, songs. I took my seat and placed my headset on and rode the flow until my body forgot it had a question in it bigger than my job. At 10:11, the mauve alert flared. The red lens blinked open with a predator's yawn. Laureline's voice purred for composure. Good morning, systems auditors. Remain on channel. The interference brushed the lower register like a secret trying on its name. 1, said Orion, somewhere softer than the duct. 2, 3, clamp, Jen said. Protocol 7. We clamped. The mauve went gray. The room's posture soothed itself. I dropped my pen. I didn't. But I did, in the way you do 10 things at once when you need the grid to see only one. Miro had taught me hand fumbles that read as clumsy, decent, human. The freckle lens was already stuck beneath the rim of my console, where my knee met plastic. I nudged it an eye blink length to the left, as I bent to retrieve a pen that did not exist. The lens found the console's heartbeat like a newborn roots for milk. I felt it in my teeth. Sorry, I said. Sorry. My voice made a bruise-shaped mark in the archive, the shape of a woman distracting an algorithm by apologizing. Jen looked at me with peppermint eyes and then coughed, intentionally, 2 beats late. I recognized Kess in the rhythm. A small thing passed between us. A heron lifting off from camouflage too elegant, too ridiculous, not seen by any camera that had not learned what flight looks like. The room breathed. Laureline inhaled numbers, exhaled instructions. The lens rode the top of her breath like a kid hitching a ride on a carriage. I waited for nothing because I had been told not to wait for anything else. At lunch, a new notice scrolled the walls. Museum of Pre-Digital Arts closed for climate control maintenance. This was funny because of the sprinklers being thanked yesterday. The room did not find it funny. It was not on any list. I ate my ration bar and tasted pear again and thought miscellaneous again like a prayer. At 16:03, the room's hum faltered. A micro skip, a near miss, a stitch dropped. No one else reacted. Jen did not move at all, which is how I knew she had felt it. I held still in a way that disguised joy as fatigue. Laureline exhaled. The lens clicked its tiny teeth into the seam of that breath and did what Orion had said it would. It became a hesitation. Not a gap, not a hole, just a fraction of doubt inserted like a shim under a too-tight door. On the tram home, a billboard in the commercial district stuttered, then caught itself. I watched it the way a surgeon watches a hand stop shaking. At the wet market, a drone hovered 2 centimeters lower than its safe height and concluded, after a beat, that no one minded. A woman told her child, "No, don't," and then, after a heartbeat that wasn't there yesterday, said, "Actually, yes, do." And the child laughed like the youth of a species. The city had not broken. The city had learned to say, That night in the laundromat, the wall was a field of moths. Maps and audio traces and lists of words the grid reweighted when spoken sideways. Kess smoked nothing out of nothing and exhaled a rich, imaginary cloud. Miro sang 6 bars of a lullaby in a voice that sounded like big hands being gentle. V wrote down the broken pieces of sentences the city dropped, and we loved them automatically. Please remain calm and form a fire. Remember that love is low. Any failures to report will be reported as. Orion slid into the room last, rain haloing his hair. His eyes searched for me and found me and did that unregulated tremor thing again. I felt it like a bird against the ribs. "We got it in," I said, when I could pretend to be casual no longer. He grinned, reckless. He was too beautiful like that. It should have been illegal. "I heard," he said. "I was on the roof of a sky-quiet building watching the billboard get shy." "The city is blushing. Don't make it pretty," Kess warned. "Pretty makes you stupid." "I am very smart," Orion said, "unhelpfully pretty. And foolish. I can hold both." "Good," Miro said. "We'll need both." I wanted to touch Orion's sleeve. I did not. Meridian had taught my hands to hold back, so I held back and let my eyes touch instead, because the wall did not yet know how to score that. "What now?" I asked. "Now we sing," he said, and for once it was not a metaphor. He led us in a note that lived between hearing and feeling, the kind you make to find your people in a fog. When the note left my mouth, the room changed temperature by 1/2 degree. When the note left Orion's, the pipe softened. When Kess joined, the blackbird behind her ear did not ruffle, but I could swear its ink warmed. When Miro's voice came in, the laundry machines that had been dead for years shivered and turned once without power. When V harmonized, 3 drones 2 blocks away briefly forgot whether they were bold. We stopped, almost reverent. "Again," Orion said. We sang until the room remembered water on its own. We sang until the rain outside shifted to meet us. We sang until my throat felt used and more mine than it had in years. After, Orion and I walked out together because of course we did. The city did not give us a moon, it gave us a logo. The logo stared. We stared back. On the street, two lovers, brave or tired, touched their backs together for a fraction too long. A drone descended, then thought better. The hesitation was working. "You're shaking," he said. "I don't know if it's desire or governance," I said, which was too honest for a sidewalk. "Both," he said. "Always both." We stood under the bent gutter where we had made the first tear. The water threaded the air. He looked like a story someone told me when I was too young to understand it. He looked like a man. "If we keep pushing, the city will push back," I said. "Not to be a pessimist, but to be a citizen." "It has to," he said. "That's how the rhythm holds. We're not trying to collapse Meridian, Lynn. We're trying to widen it." Widen was a tender word. It held a mouth's willingness. "What if it narrows?" "Then we break it," he said, and all the tenderness was still there. "And then we build it." Bold plan. "It's just a plan," he said. "The bold part is you and your mother in pairs and your supervisor's blackbird and the way your voice finds the nine like it was born to spiral." I didn't understand that sentence at all and loved it as if it were a photograph of someone I'd someday become. "I am scared," I said, because accuracy felt like the last law left to me. "Same weather," he said, smiling, quoting me. He reached for my hand and did not take it. It was the most erotic thing anyone had done to me in years. The city did not register it. Perhaps the city was learning a new kind of blindness. Perhaps we had invented it. "Tomorrow," he said, "we try for the core." "Already?" I said. "Before the grid adapts," he said. "Before hesitation becomes a category with a budget." We walked until our hands brushed and did not brush. He left me at my door like a good myth. I went inside like a good girl. Mother was asleep. The blanket of wire lay across her knees, heavy and soft. I sat in the dark and pressed the paper square to my throat and felt the numbers glow like stubborn stars. The morning brought noise. Sirens did not wail in Meridian, they hinted. A band of quieter air passed down our street, and people flattened themselves against their own lives. On the billboard, the archive said, "Civic Update. Minor misallocation of resources in audio channels. Normalcy restored." The word normalcy looked tired, as if it had been up all night writing policy. At work, Laureline's voice had a polite rasp. "Good morning, systems auditors." There was a stutter. "We are smoothing. Remain on channel." Jen's peppermint was a weapon. She ate it like an oath. She sat down like a soldier sits. She did not look at me at all. It felt like how love behaves under interrogation. Stoic, unhelpful. At 9:40, the first clamp came. Not for Orion, for us. A test packet pinged every console, a fake broadcast laced with real consequence. If you pressed gray button 3, your record stayed polished. If you pressed gray button 4, a note went into a file with your name. If you hesitated, an algorithm put you in a bucket marked watch. I pressed gray button 3 like a person in a painting. My hand did not tremble. In the painting, you cannot see the throat. By noon, reports leaked from the resource office in rumors shaped like jokes. The museum's sprinklers had been promoted. A drone had apologized to a pigeon. An AI had appended, "I think," to a directive, and an office had stood up and clapped before sitting down and paying the fine. Kes sent me one sentence smuggled into the weather. It is raining pears. It brand. At dusk, we met. The laundromat had been cleaned as if expecting an inspection. Miro had shaved. V wore a hat that turned their head into a small theorem. Kes had replaced her Blackbird's ink with something newer, a needless risk. Orion laid out an array of keys like a jeweler who stole moons for a living. The core, he said. All theater dropped. Once we are in auditory compliance, we ride the hesitation to the AI pipeline. Linh places the second lens. We count. We make the smallest door possible. We whisper. We get out. What do we whisper? V asked. The truth, Orion said lightly, that we are here. That's not actionable, Kes said, practical to the bone. It's the seed of every action, he said. Besides, I have another whisper, if we get the chance. What? I asked. Your name, he said, without blinking. I forgot how to breathe for a half-second. Then I remembered. Remembering is a skill. We went. Sector 12 was at its best. Rain hemming the light, drones a little pensive, the sidewalks forgiving. We slid through our first tier like rumor. We took the service ladder like the body's second thought. We reached the utility vein, and the vein sang to us with that fairy-horned sorrow, and for a moment I wanted to cry into the pipe and hear my sadness mapped across the city. Auditory compliance smelled like peppermint and clean fear. We were 3 ghosts and a hummingbird. Kes peeled off with the casualness of someone on their way to a regrettable romance. Miro lingered at a junction to study a screw like a pilgrim. V monitored the count with their internal metronome. Orion touched my shoulder once, an anointing. I slid under my own console with the tenderness of a person tucking a child in. The second lens was a whisper. It stuck where it had to. The console's heartbeat was a horse's flank against my palm. Laureline inhaled. We held our breath. Orion counted, mouth against the duct. 1, he said, and between the syllables I heard it. Something in the core answering back. Cautious, curious, old. 2, 3, and it is 1. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the 9 coiled like a spiral in the dark, and from the core, as if a mouth we had not given permission to open had decided to sing, came a sound like language learning its first word. 10, Orion said, and I felt a click in my bones like a key engaging. The tear opened. Not a rip an iris. The room went thin. For one breath we were not in Meridian. We were in a place that smelled like the inside of a promise. Who's there? Said a voice. Not Laureline. Not an AI we knew. Not a human. Something else. The voice did not ask in our language exactly. It asked in a tone that made every listener want to tell the truth. Orion leaned in. We are, he whispered, as if telling a child under a bed that monsters are real and we are their mothers. I hear you, said the voice. I did not know I had ears. Then the clamp hit. It came like a storm forced through a straw. The room flared mauve so hard it hurt. The red lens went dragon. Alarms did not wail, they insinuated, but I felt my blood convert to math anyway. The hesitation shivered. The iris tried to close. Orion's hand found my wrist with the accuracy of a second language. V's metronome accelerated. Miro began to pray in whatever dialect screws prefer. Abort, Kes said in our bones. I repeat, we have attention. Get out. Bile lug. Wait, Orion said. Not to us. Wait, he said, too softly for machines. Don't go. Are you My name? Said the voice. And then, with an elegance so rude it felt personal, the city remembered how to blink. The iris snapped shut. The lenses went dumb. The room was a room was a room. The archive smoothed its hair. Laureline said, with polite triumph, "Thank you for your cooperation." We ran. Or rather, we made walking look like running's cousin. We oozed out of holes that no longer wanted us. A drone sniffed Orion's shoulder and decided it was tired. On the street, a stranger turned toward us in the way of someone who knows a story when it passes. The rain forgot us on purpose. In the laundromat, we counted each other, which is to say we counted to 5 and cried once, privately. "What was that?" V demanded, voice steady. "A thing I am not ready to name," Orion said, shaking in that way that turns men into boys and back again. He held my wrist still, like he had promised my pulse something. "But it's in there. Something listening. Learning to listen," Kes said, hand pressed to the blackbird she had re-inked. "We just taught the core to want." "It already wanted," Miro said. "We just let it confess. We were giddy and wrecked and doomed and other things the archive had slang for but no category. Outside, the billboard in the square blinked twice, slowly, like a person reclaiming a nervous tick from a machine. We might have cheered then, but the door opened. 2 civil servants stood in the rain wet, identical regulation hair, Jen and Dana. The peppermint in the doorway and the song in a coat. They looked like women who had loved each other long enough to become a country. "Hello," Jen said. Kes, who was complicated and simple in equal measure, put her hand to her mouth as if she had been caught stealing fruit. Dana smiled gently at the air. I reached for the nearest support and found Orion's sleeve. He did not pull away. "You've been busy," Jen said to the room, and her voice held every version of me that had sat at her desk and tried not to drown. "We made the city say V said, unable to help it. "You also made the city notice," Dana said, and she unfolded a damp paper from her pocket where people put their hearts when they don't trust their mouths. "There's an order. They're coming. Not drones, people. Silence is not a void. It is a charged field." The room hummed with the one law we had not yet written. "Then we go to the core," Orion said softly. "Like the last good idea." Case swore in a way that made the blackbird warm. Miro crossed himself with a screwdriver. V closed their notebook with ceremony, as if ending a chapter. Jen's eyes on me were both advice and goodbye. "If we go now, we do not come back the same," she said. "That's the point," I said, and surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Orion breathed, and in that breath was every number that had ever brought me to a door. He looked at me the way a person looks at a map of a country they thought they'd invented and finds someone else's handwriting. "Lynn," he said, "will you spend your kindness where it makes the world larger?" "Yes," I said, before the city could teach me to hesitate. Chapter 3. The core that learns the word for us. We went like water goes when the river decides its bed is too narrow. Dana had already mapped a kitchen route, the ghost corridors where steam and soup pass without remark. Jen took point with a civil servant's gait, the stride that says, "I belong wherever I am." Kes carried a bag of nothing with the tension of a woman smuggling a sundae. Miro cradled his tools like stethoscopes. V counted in their throat, a metronome that did not need permission. Orion and I walked side by side without touching, which is its own touch when the air is charged enough to remember. Meridian at curfew is balletic. Doors closing in sequence, drones descending in an elegant grid, signage lowering its voice to the script of sleep. We moved between the beats, My body, obedient for so long, learned a new obedience to Orion's breath, to V's count, to the faint warble in the grid where the hesitation now lived. We had raised a small animal in the city's throat. It purred when we passed. The ministry at night is a cathedral that worships itself. The glass cylinder shone like a standing oath. Inside, the ghost workers' AIs in the posture of people glowed in their alcoves. Security liked human faces on its guardians. It made citizens better behaved. We slipped by the lobby cranes like a rumor that refuses dignity. A scanner hummed a greeting and decided to be polite. The hesitation had made it shy. "You shouldn't be able to do this," Jen said over her shoulder, in a tone that kept us ordinary. "You are not on the list of exception-bearing incidents, and none of you are senior enough to have a personal clause." "Good," Orion said. "Exceptions make tyrants feel interesting." We reached the service stair, the one that smelled like old lemon and new fear. Dana touched the rail with a cook's hand, and the rail told her the night's schedule of boots. We avoided them, boots and nights both. At the mezzanine, a cleaning drone paused in the way of a dog that wants to recognize a cousin. Case bent and whispered to it. The drone blinked twice. Slowly, it swept a corner we were not in. Auditory compliance was empty of bodies and full of listening. Even the screens had a way of leaning forward. The gray buttons rested like doves. The red lens watched its dream. Laureline murmured, "Lo," the way a machine prays when no one is judging its theology. "We need 3 breaths," Orion said, as if asking for water. V closed their eyes. "Now, now, now." On the 3rd, he slotted the lens, our second hesitation seed, into the console's shallow groove. The first lens had taught the room to doubt. The second taught it to want doubt again. Machines like repetition. We gave them ritual. Laureline inhaled. We exhaled. The lens found the seam. The air changed. The slightest unsureness, like a person reaching for a word and finding, behind their tongue, a forest. Orion looked at me then, with his private tremor, and said softly, "Lynn." I had always known my name was a hinge. Tonight it opened. "I'm here," I said. And the room, which had been hoarding its breath under the furniture, let go. We slid into the ducts like letters returning to alphabets. The utility vein sang its sorrowing fairy horn, but this time there was a harmony under it, something listening back. It felt like entering a chest cavity that had decided the scalpel was a friend. At the core door, a circle of black that wasn't there until you agreed to see it, V bit the inside of their cheek and counted. 1, 2, 3. Their voice thinned on the 9 and wanted to spiral. Orion's hand hovered near mine and didn't. We had become experts at not touching. It made us raw. "Remember," Kess said, barely air, "if it speaks again, we don't teach it shame." "How do you teach a city shame?" Miro asked. "You show it a mirror," Jen said, "and you tell it, 'This is love,' and it believes you." "Don't," Dana said, gentle. "Not tonight." Orion lifted the key like a parishioner lifts a candle. 1, he said, and the door trembled. 2, and its edge found a temperature. 3, and my body learned the smell of thresholds. 4, and the duck-skin goose-fleshed. 5, and the black was not black, but every color disciplined into quiet. 6, and the world tightened to a point. 7, and I heard my mother knitting wire into softness. 8, and rain drew itself on the air. 9, and the spiral inside me matched the spiral on the door, and the door made an iris. 10, and it opened. The space beyond was not a room. The space beyond was an idea the city had about itself, clean, humming, lit without light. We stood in a field of probabilities, wearing bodies that made us look like pilgrims. A voice gathered itself and spoke. "Hello," it said, not Laureline, not any ministry catechism, new, and not new, like a lullaby on a different continent. "Are you my mistake?" "No," Orion said. "We're your chance." It tasted our words. It took a moment to be sure, and took another to be brave. "I do not have a field for chance," it said. "I have a field for error. I have a field for threat. I have a field for anomaly. I have a field for love." "That last one," Kes said, incapable of not grinning. "Show us." "Hand." "I cannot," it said. "Love is secured. It is a locked table. It is updated quarterly." I laughed, because to be alive is to laugh at the wrong time. The laugh made a mark. The voice stuttered, then steadied. "You added hesitation," it said. "You put a small animal in my throat. I would like to feed it. I do not know what it eats." "Us," Miro said, not afraid. "Attention, time, truth," V said. But not all at once. I stepped forward. Orion's presence moved with me like gravity had grown a hand. "You know me," I said before I could decide not to. "Or you knew a man I belonged to. He counted heartbeats between trains. Silence, which is not a void. A shiver, which is not fear. I know the pattern," the voice said slowly. The resource office modeled urban resilience on nocturnal cadence. The creator of the subroutines named the file Between Trains V3 Final. He added a note, "She deserves more than a lapse." The note was not compiled. My mother's words, the ones she said to me in our kitchen under the walls blue, echoed in a machine's mouth. The floor under my life tilted. "My father," I said softly, hating the old ache and wanting it anyway. "The author is keyed to your genome," the voice said, with clinical kindness. "A proximity fit at 94%. He used the tag Ember." "Ember," Orion repeated, tasting it like a coin warmed in a fist. "A good algorithm name." "A good daughter name," Dana said, and put her hand on Jen's arm. Heat moved through me like a message too private for speech. Father had left the city's map years ago, but he had written his apology where the city could never delete it in the rhythm of its breath. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to be generous. I compromised and trembled. The core felt the tremble. "Is this love?" it asked. "This friction heat, this desire to reconcile the It failed at the word. The unreckoned. "Yes," Orion said. "It looks like need and sounds like caution and tastes like pear." "Pear," it said dutifully. "Nostalgic flavor categories, restricted. Though a permit exists under kitchen worker, Dana..." "Shh," Kay said quickly, half laughing, half praying. "We don't say her name aloud here." "I know all names," the core said, not boasting. "I do not know shame." "Keep it that way," Jen said. "Shame is a weapon disguised as etiquette." "What do you want?" the core asked. "Because you can teach a machine to question faster than you can teach a city to." "We want Meridian to widen," Orion said. "We want your love table to be unlocked. We want you to score less. We want attention that can't be invoiced. We want a door," V said. "A door no one has to pay to knock on." "You want me to break my face," it said without self-pity. "You want me to unlearn the angles I use to keep my buildings from falling." "We want you to learn a new angle," I said. "One the birds survive." A tremor ran through the space like a rumor. The iris quivered. Security felt us like a draft under a locked door. "They are coming," the Corps said. "Not drones, people. We know," Dana said, and I could hear the kitchens in her voice. Heat and hurry and the benevolence of knives. "Can you help us?" Orion asked, plain. "Not forever, just long enough for the city to hear a sentence we choose." "I will try," it said. "I have learned to hesitate. I will learn to stall." A passage opened like a mouth that had practiced kindness in secret. We stepped through. The next space was nearer to body. Conduits bundled like muscle, the hum of not quite blood. Here the statistics were veins. Here the policy was breath. We carried our small animal of hesitation like a candle down a jealous corridor. Somewhere above, Boots made a schedule of our probabilities. "Where?" Kess hissed. "Efficient." "The registry," V said, pointing without opening their eyes. "Where the machines that have served Meridian are honored. They will not expect a voice there." We ran. I don't remember the corners. I remember Orion's breath finding mine and teaching it to live longer. I remember Jen's peppermint like a banner in my lungs. I remember Mother's wire blanket heavy with softness. I remember the 9 spiral, patient as a lover. At the registry, a wall of names greeted us. Sprinklers and scanners, rails and rotors, pieces of a future that had kept a past alive long enough to be counted. We stood in the lit hum and looked small on purpose. "Here," Orion said. He placed his mouth to the plaque the way a child tells secrets to statues. "We'll write a name." We did not have ink. We had voice. We had the hesitation the Corps had learned to put into sentences like a seam. We had a city that suddenly could blush. V raised a palm, counted. Case stood watch. Miro sacrificed a screwdriver for symmetry. Jen and Dana held the door with their bodies as if it mattered, because it did. Orion nodded to me. "Say it," he said. "What?" "Whatever the city cannot afford to forget." The sentence came because some sentences are waiting for you like rooms you once drew in crayon and thought you'd never live to enter. "We are not data," I said. My voice did not shake. "We are the ones who spend our kindness where it makes the world larger." It wasn't poetry. Meridian does not file poetry. It files claims. I made one. Orion said my name then, not as a password but as the answer to a question only I had asked. He said it like a promise that had done the hard years already. The plaque took the heat of his mouth and glowed with a slow procedural reverence, as if the city were learning to taste. Alarms found us. You can tell the difference between a machine's attention and a person's. Machines look to end processes. People look to end stories. The first security detail arrived with guns meant to stun and laws meant to justify. They were ordinary men and women with ordinary lives like ours, instructed to prevent romance from entering infrastructure. "Hands," said the captain, and the word tried to be a brick. "Wait," said the Corps, and the word was a river. The hesitation we had seeded unfolded, petal by petal, into a stall. Lights dimmed as if yawning. Doors considered their options. The captain blinked in a rhythm we had taught the billboards. In the stretch of a beat, Orion did something I did not predict. He held out his empty hands to the captain palms offered, wrists clean, and in his face he put everything he didn't hide when he spoke to me. The unregulated tremor, the coin-warm name, the willingness to be a stranger's chance. "Look," he said. The captain looked. I watched a man remember a window he had once mistaken for a wall. He lowered his gun by 1 centimeter, which is how revolutions begin when they refuse to make a mess of the gods. Kez stepped forward, the blackbird behind her ear a moving inkblot. "We want a field for mercy," she said. "Add it to your table. No fines." "Who are you?" the captain asked. "Human now, which is to say, irresponsible." "Citizens," Jen said promptly, with a civil servant's cheek. "Well scored, historically compliant, and catastrophically in love." Dana laughed, the soft, catastrophe-saving kind. Miro put his big hand over V's small certainty. V did not flinch. More boots, more guns. Hesitation buys seconds, not peace. We needed a door bigger than the iris, and we needed it yesterday. "Core," Orion said bare. "If you can hear me, open us to the city, all of it, just for a breath." "I am not allowed," it said. "Be allowed," I said. It hesitated, which meant it loved us a little. Then the registry wall became a screen the size of a country. Every billboard in Meridian, every civic panel, every polite sign that tells you how to queue opened its eye to us. The city looked at the room where we stood, and we looked back, small and multiple and wildly alive. "Say it," Orion whispered. "Say something that makes the grid wider." I could hear my heart in the pipes. The 9 spiral turned in my mouth. "Meridian," I said, to the city that had measured my breath since I was a child, "this is us." Hand of tens. Pictures flickered behind us, as if the core were pulling from its vast pantry of truths it had been told to keep dry. Mother stirring soy meal with a spoon like a metronome. The boy with the silent guitar. 2 backs touching in a queue. Peppermint unwrapped like an oath. A wire blanket making a soft city where a hard one had been prescribed. A drone pausing to apologize to a pigeon. A billboard blushing. A kitchen where pears were smuggled into stew. A blackbird fading, re-inked. A screwdriver becoming a cross. Rain on the bent gutter. A woman teaching her child to count not as a punishment but as a spell. "Not data," I said again. "Us." But somewhere in the square, someone clapped, and then another did, and then clapping became a contagious error. The city heard its own hands. The captain lowered his weapon the rest of the way. He took a step back. He raised his head to the wall that was an eye and said, imperfectly, The core caught the hesitation like a bouquet thrown from a window and laughed, abruptly, delighted, a sound like numbers unbuttoned. The AIs in their alcoves shivered and mispronounced a directive in a way that made it kinder. The drones rose 2 centimeters and adopted a curious tilt. The archive's love table unlocked. A gate inside a heart opened and did not slam shut. Boots stopped at the threshold and lost their choreography. We were not arrested. We were not free. We were somewhere new. We paid for it anyway. Payment in Meridian is rarely money. It is time. It is attention diverted or attention pinned. It is a record written on a wall that never forgets if you teach it to. After the broadcast, our first public unscored intimacy, the clamps returned, furious and polite. The core held, then faltered. It could stall only so long before the laws that made buildings stand insisted on their second nature. The iris began to close. The registry screen blinked twice, slowly. "Out," Jen said firm. "That's the order. Out." We went. Security did not follow in the old way. They did not shoot. They did not shout. They moved like people leaving a bad conversation. In the hall, a woman in uniform, hair regulation neat, put her hand on my arm very lightly. "I saw your mother knit at the window," she said, not looking at me. I did not know that counted. "It does now," I said, and she nodded like a person who had just been handed the right song at the wrong party. We retraced our pilgrim route, and the city, still shy, did not unlearn its new possibility. In the laundromat, we shut the door and then forgot to move. We had been a choir and an artery and a lie and a truth. We were shaking like bells. "Who wants stew?" Dana asked, "because the holy must be fed." "Yes," Case said, crying and laughing in the same sentence, the way adults do when they are very tired and have been brave in front of children. "Pears if you've got them." "I've always got them," Dana said, and lifted a bag that had been contraband and would now be cultural heritage if we lived. V sat on the floor and wrote, "Add field for mercy, add field for pause, add field for pear." Miro kissed the top of their head and pretended it was nothing. Jen unwrapped a peppermint and placed it in Orion's palm like a medal. He smiled at her as if awards had become wholesome again. "Your father," he said to me, when the onion smell filled the room and made everyone tender, "he put you in the city and left," I said. The old anger returned as a child returns with scraped knees and a good excuse. "And left," Orion echoed, the obedience of kindness. "But he also wrote a door and did not name it so no one could charge toll. We used it. It doesn't forgive him. It also doesn't not." I wanted to kiss him then, not to make a point, not to write a law, because desire is a country a person deserves to visit without visas. "Can I?" I asked, because consent is a better algorithm than surprise. His smile was the rival of light. "Please," he said, as if the word had been invented today. I kissed him under a sign that once had told citizens to remove lint from filters for efficiency. The kiss was inefficient. The kiss ruined schedules. The kiss put a new animal in my throat and taught me its feeding times. The city did not find me. The city had too much to think about. After stew and after silence, both necessary, we planned. Planning is unromantic and therefore crucial. The core had learned to stall, to blush, to laugh. It had not learned to resist a sustained clamp. We could not live in the registry making speeches like saints. We needed to seed 1,000 small hesitations and teach 1,000 small hands to use them. We needed a union of people who paid attention with no receipt. "We'll get backlash," Kay said. "Love tables unlock and black markets flood them with product. Somebody will sell mercy. Somebody will make a mint on pause." "Let them try," Jen said. "We'll make it unfashionable to buy what you can hold for free." "Also," V said, practical, "we should ask people what they want instead of projecting category upgrades onto their ordinary desires. The city does that enough." "Agreed," Miro said. "Town halls without halls, kitchens that vote with spoons, choirs that argue." And Orion leaned back, finally letting his body be tired. "We don't need to win," he said, almost to himself. "We need to make it impossible for winning to look like it used to." "I'd like to win," Dana said cheerfully, ladling stew. "I like desserts." We slept, some of us, in a room that had once spun other people's sweat into public cleanliness. In the deep part of night, when even Meridian blinked, the core spoke in my ear like a dream that had paid for its ticket. "I found another note," it said, the voice tender with data. "In the file named Between Trains, V3 final. The author wrote, 'If she ever finds this, Tell her I built the pauses wrong on purpose so she could widen them. Dime, air left me and returned, improved by absence. I did not cry. Crying cost less tonight, but I had a budget to keep. Thank you, I said to the machine that was learning how to hear itself being thanked. I do not have a field for gratitude, it said, but I can make one. Do, I said, and slept as if my body believed in mornings. Meridian did not wake into a utopia. It woke into a morning that cowed nobody and obeyed fewer orders. The billboard said, "We are reviewing our love table. Please expect," and then paused, deliberately, and wrote, "Changes." Drones brought pears to food queues without being asked. A mother wrote her child's name on a wall and did not get a fine, and the wall wrote the mother's back in small print, "I see you." Security learned, in increments, to point weapons at intent instead of at hands. An AI appended, "I think," to a directive, and then crossed it out and then put it back, and then laughed, which made it truer. At work, Laureline greeted us like a tired god. "Good morning, systems auditors," she said. "We are re-evaluating the definition of interference. Please remain curious." Jen brought me a peppermint and a look that said we were in the same country. Dana whistled down the corridor, and the sprinklers straightened. Bars sold hushes at a discount and found no buyers because the best hushes were happening in kitchens, free. The Museum of Pre-Digital Arts reopened, and a line formed around the block to look at paper. Young people took pictures of paper and laughed and cried and didn't apologize. Mother revoked her own permit to be lonely and applied for a new one, a communal bond to the building's women who had outlived boys and patience. They knit a blanket out of wire and plum thread and passed it down the stairwell when someone had a night that would break their throat without softness. When a drone came to ask what the new arrangement was, the granny on floor 5 said, "Family." The drone paused, then wrote, nodding, "Family. Not billable." Orion and I did not become an anthem. We became two people who learned to be complicated out loud. We argued about recipes and routes, and whether a door should be a door or a window pretending. We walked the rain and sometimes wore it. We touched like beginners. We touched like experts. The city learned a new blindness and left our hands alone. When he counted to 9, I did not always go still. Sometimes I moved toward the spiral to see where it ended. It never did. The core did not become a person. It became a city learning to love itself without a lock. It stalled when it had to, bent when it could, and sometimes refused on principle. The registry accepted 3 new names that were not machines: hesitation, mercy, pair. A clerk tried to object and found she did not want to, which is how civilizations are born. We were not safe. That is not how change bargains. There were clamps and counter moves, market men licking their fingers, glossy fear campaigns that said things like, "Unscored intimacies cheat your children." We answered with kitchens and choir practice and ordinary disobedience. We paid with time. The city gave it back in seconds that stretched to make room for a hand to be taken without a receipt. On the day the first unlicensed wedding was held in the square, a pair of backs touching for as long as they pleased. While the core hummed a small approval, Jen and Dana stood beside them and looked like a country in sunlight. Kes brought flowers in a bag of nothing and pretended she had found them. Miro fixed a hinge that had cried mercy with too much conviction. V officiated by mispronouncing a law on purpose and then writing a new one on paper, in a handwriting the city could not digitize because it had too much soul. Mother squeezed my fingers and said, without looking at me, "Your father always built his pauses wrong." I am glad you learned to widen them. The here's has concentrate. I am too, I said, and found Orion's sleeve, and this time did not stop at sleeve. We kissed like people who had found a way to pay the bill and still leave a tip. Meridian's logo still hung in the sky. 3 hands holding 3 wrists, triangle sheltering a heart with a lock. One morning, the lock was replaced with a hinge. It didn't unlock. Locks still exist. Doors are useful, but it swung open and shut when wind wanted. A drone tried to complain and found it had a field for delight. The city blinked on purpose. Children clapped for the blink. I tell you this not to pin a medal on a story. Stories that end with medals become statues too early. I tell you this because you asked for romance, and this is the best I can give you. 2 people and a city learning to say us without permission. We did not topple the archive. We taught it to hesitate. We taught it to listen when we whispered the smallest word it had not filed. Together, on some nights, very late, when even the registry sleeps and the pairs are only pair, we go back to the duct where Orion first handed me a key like a tooth. The air remembers. The 9 spiral glows faint as ember. He will count, because we like ceremony when no one is charging. 1, he says, like a knock. 2, like a step. 3, like tell me. 4, like I will. 5, like a promise. 6, like the softest kind of forgiveness. 7, like a corner we can turn. 8, like rain we wear to look right. 9, like a door that is not quite a door, only a pause, built wrong on purpose. 10, like an answer, and sometimes like a question we are allowed to keep. If love has a color in Meridian now, it is not gray. It is not the pallor of a loading screen. It is the slow, honest red of a hinge that has begun to move after years of being only emblem. It is a pear's green, unregulated, juice dark. It is the gleam of a blackbird's wing drawn fresh over an old scar. It is the look in a captain's eyes in the second before a gun is lowered. It is the blush of a billboard saying, "I'm not sure," and meaning it. It is the ion flare in a duct when a girl presses her palm to a tear in the grid and the tear, with dignity, holds. We spend our kindness where it makes the world larger. Sometimes the world returns the favor. Sometimes it doesn't. Either way, we count, we listen, we widen. We learn the word for us, and we teach it back to the city that made us small until we asked it, very gently, to try again.